Well, hello everyone. We were just meeting backstage, and it's probably a good idea we did because we thought this panel was on the colonization of Mars, and we just got sorted. But we're here to talk about gaming. All jokes aside, why don't we kick it off with a little video here? You want to cue the video?
Are you ready to be a part of history? The Milk Cup! This will be the biggest Fortnite opportunity yet for women in gaming. Awesome. So some unbelievable people up here, and I think what is going to make this panel really interesting is just the different doors the panelists come in through. So Claire, why don't we start with you? You know,
Yes.
the conversation of gaming has been around, well, probably for almost forever, as long as the internet has been around and computers have been around. But it's kind of having a moment. It's kind of emerging. You know, why do you think that is? What do you think's going on recently in the last few years? Why do you think it's kind of bubbled up?
Yeah, so I think we're seeing two key things happen at the same time. One is we're seeing a generational shift in terms of gaming audiences. So you look at geriatric millennials like myself, I can say that because I am one. This is the first generation that really grew up with gaming. So grew up with gaming as a kid and has kind of taken it through into life and into adulthood. And as geriatric millennials and Gen X are starting to have children, they're introducing gaming to their kids. And so what we're seeing is as people are starting to age, gaming is actually becoming much more of just another piece of entertainment. You know, it's not this kind of niche hobby anymore. It's very much just part of the entertainment mix and day-to-day life. The other thing that is happening is there's also a technological shift that's happening. And so we've seen now in terms of some of the advancements in game technology, I'm going to point to mobile specifically. A lot of the barriers to entry that existed for gaming previously have now been taken away. You no longer need to own an expensive console to be able to play games. If you have a mobile, you have a gaming device in your pocket. That has made it much easier for folks to get into gaming. The way that games are designed as well in mobile has kind of, made it, casual gaming so that you can actually pick up a new game and learn it much more easier. There isn't quite that same learning curve that was. And then I think when you layer on top of those two things that are happening, this desire from the ad industry to really look for experiences that are immersive, that capture attention, where you really, are able to speak to an audience that is really highly engaged. And I often talk about gaming superpower is its ability to kind of capture this attention. I think when you combine all those things together, you get a sense of why, kind of gaming is happening now and kind of having its moment, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was really interesting, and Julie, I'm going to ask you to maybe share a story you were just sharing backstage, because Claire just kind of touched on it. I think we have a perception of gaming, but we were talking about mobile gaming, and we were also talking about the habits gaming forms. Julie, do you want to talk a little bit about, your lean into gaming, your micro gaming, maybe the story you shared backstage as a way to kind of to broaden the spectrum of the gaming conversation?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what's funny is we have such a spectrum of the different backgrounds that we all represent on stage, and everyone's really, you say everyone's a gamer, but I said, well, why do you want me to talk about gaming? We, at the NWSL, we have a big integration with one of the biggest sport games in the world with FIFA. It's now called EAFC. And then we started talking about, well, we actually do play the New York Times crossword puzzle, or we do play Wordle, or we do play these quick turn games from, some people play Sudoku, or some people will play, you know, a Roblox game. There's so much spectrum, but at the end of the day, we're all engineered to do some kind of entertainment on our phone. And what does that mean? So in many ways, yeah, we're all gamers, right?
We are all gamers, and Ajay, we were talking backstage about the community that you've built at Lenovo. I was a little taken back by the size of that community, and also just kind of its lean in and its fandom. Do you want to share that story with us all? I think it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, look, I mean, 7-8 years ago, we started, taking gaming very seriously, started selling machines. Now, obviously, we sell phones and lots of games on phones. But when we started, and I obviously, as a person who runs e-commerce, was always focused on how do you monetize gaming. And so we built a community with the idea that, hey, we can monetize these people better. 8 years later, I think my view on that has completely changed post-pandemic. And now it's more about how do you build a community where gamers who are generally Gen Zs and Alphas can come, spend time, build a relationship with a brand, but more importantly, actually talk to each other. So community in gaming in particular has changed dramatically. So look, we have 2 million people on our gaming community called Legion around the world, and most of the people that come back spend most of their time talking to friends, connecting with the community, but the idea is to actually hang out and talk to each other. So gaming communities have become much more about trying to connect with people rather than monetization.
When you think about the gaming community, how do you think about its stickiness or its engagement? Do you find those 2 million folks have a higher level of engagement, whether it's because of the competitive aspect of gaming or the community aspect of gaming? Do you see a difference when you look at different communities, but in the gaming community, are there some attributes that you see with that community?
Yeah, I think, look, every community has very similar tenets. Gaming, of course, I think it's the one thing that we look at is how many times do people come back and what do they actually do in the community. So as an example, our online community that we run, 43% of the people come back, which is a great stat because on my SMB community, as an example, small and medium business, it's like 20% or 10%. For gaming, I think people coming back because we are doing something with them every single day, that's a great metric for us to follow. Now, obviously, what we also do, which I find very interesting, is what they actually contribute. So they actually do things on the gaming side, which we prompt them to do, which allows them to kind of drive engagement. So we look at both. Do they produce a video and send us what our Legion community should do with respect to clothes that some of the gamers should wear, as an example. So when we developed a AAA game, we let them actually build weapons design, and allowed them to use the weapons in the game. So this engagement, I think, is pretty good when they actually are part of the process.
They almost become creators of the game.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And Julie, you're interesting because you are a league of sports, and we're here in Sport Beach, which demonstrates fandom and the power of sports. And I think, when you boil it down in your league, you're playing a game, right? You're playing soccer, which is obviously a sport, but is a game. So talk to me a little bit about the adjacency of like the in real life game and the extensions that you have, across that community to get them into what would be more viewed as gaming from a video perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's great is we're able to deepen the engagement. So we're a professional sports league, the NWSL's National Women's Soccer League. It's one of the fastest growing sport leagues in the world. We have 14 clubs in the U.S. We have players all around the U.S., all around the world. In the past World Cup, there were about 61 players from different countries. And as we go into the Olympics next month, you'll see a lot of countries and players represented that not just play inside the NWSL, but make their home outside of the club and country. So what's kind of fun is we just entered into gaming last year with EA, as I mentioned, the FIFA game, and it was actually able to drive our brand metrics. We went up about 5% in brand awareness just from the engagement numbers that we were able to see with all of our players. But the fans of soccer or the fans of women's soccer or the fans of EA, FIFA that wanted to play with women inside their game. So right now on the Ultimate Team, there's probably 73 teams, about 1,600 players that are women players inside the game. And I don't mean women players of the game. I mean athletes inside professional sports leagues like the NWSL, but also FA, UEFA, Champions League, and a bunch of the other leagues around the globe. What I've found is the avidity levels really get you to engage. So you could go watch a game on television. Right now we're on Amazon Prime, we're on CBS, we're on ESPN, and we're on Scripps Ion, and we also have a direct-to-consumer property. So you play and watch it, or I'm sorry, you watch a game, but then you can go play the game, and through the games you end up buying merch or you buy different pieces of it. So what we find is it's really deepening the fan avidity and beyond just watching the game, but it's also bringing new fans in.
I think you're kind of touching on a really interesting point here. As we think about gaming communities, it doesn't just happen within the game itself. And it isn't just kind of traditional multiplayer games that we think of, like Call of Duty or what have you. We actually see one of the titles that Activision Blizzard makes is Candy Crush. But we actually see, that's traditionally thought of as like a single player kind of gaming experience. We actually see a lot of connection in forums, about Candy Crush, like on other channels. Like outside of the game, people are connecting about, they're talking about levels, they're talking about characters, they're talking about all these different elements of it. And so I think this idea of the connection taking place out, beyond just the platform, across multiple different areas and kind of strengthening that affinity and that fandom, I think is really important.
Yeah, and if we just move that a little even further, Claire, I mean, we heard about the Lenovo community, we heard about, and the metrics, we talked a little bit about engagement, we heard about the metrics, we've talked about, kind of more, I'm going to call them stereotypical gaming, which is in the basement, maybe first, we've talked about micro gaming, but we're still not seeing, brands and agencies lean in with probably as much focus as we would expect, and we definitely see that on the agency side. Like, how do you work with agencies and brands to kind of bring together what is a really compelling story that we've talked about here in this last 10 minutes to kind of get them to maybe lean a little bit more into gaming?
Yeah, I think one of the barriers for entry for brands into gaming is that it is quite a complex ecosystem. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach with gaming. We talk about this number, there's 3.4 billion gamers globally. It's not like you can kind of purchase them all on one platform, So there's so many different ways you can activate within the gaming space. We talk about this kind of in the game, outside of the game, around the game. There are the rewarded video ads in a mobile game like Candy Crush. There's billboards that you see in kind of racing games and Call of Duty. Then there's working with streamers. There's esports. There's so many different ways. And I think that's honestly quite intimidating for folks because the other thing they don't want to do is they don't want to get it wrong, especially if they haven't activated in gaming before. We're talking about how passionate gaming fans are. They will speak up if they don't like something. And so brands don't want to do it wrong. And so I think there's this kind of intimidation factor. And so a lot of the work that I do, but I think that the gaming industry has a role to do as well, is really around this education piece and being a partner to brands who are interested in gaming and kind of walking them through the different ways they can activate, the different audiences they can reach. One experience might be right for one brand, not another. And so really this education piece and removing some of that intimidation and fear and helping them know that you're kind of in this safe space. We are a gaming publisher. The last thing we want to do is put a brand experience within our title that players don't like. That is not good for us, So we want the players at the heart of everything that we do with brands. And so that's our philosophy when we're working with brands and we're kind of partnering with them and helping them navigate through this ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to ask a question off the script here, so I might not get any answers, but stay with me. So a few years ago, we all suffered through the Web3 kind of phenomenon where no one could actually describe what Web3 was, and then it kind of went away. And you could have argued that Web3, well, it's true. I see that dude laughing at the back. We all know it happened, brother. The thing is, though, you could argue Web3 had a branding problem, right? So the question I have is, does gaming have a branding problem? Like, is it too large? It's like saying I should be in media. But it's like, well, so is part of the challenge, and Julie, maybe you have a perspective, we have a branding problem with gaming? Has it become too wide, too expansive to really figure out how to dig into?
Sounds so precious. Like Web3 makes you not say, I want to try it. Like it's the opposite of being inclusive and inviting. And it's, I think what happens is you build something through a tech lens versus consumer lens, and you're thinking about how to grow the audience and how to make it approachable and accessible. I mean, we started talking about how I didn't think I'm a gamer, but yet I'm obsessed with my connections on my New York Times app, and I was in the middle of dinner last night, had to stop and get it done because it was going to turn the date and I would have missed it. So the reality is is like it's in some ways, I think, gaming's a lot like gambling, sports betting, because the old regime of gambling and sports betting was always seen as this like janky, lowbrow, bookie, scary, these kind of moments that you do not feel like it's a business, or it's got a. Now you go to a Wynn in Vegas on a Friday night, and there's people that are just high net worth individuals playing and spending, and it's a lot clean and well lit, and digital apps that have made it a better thing. So I think the branding world is a lot like the sports betting world was. I'm sorry, the gaming world's a lot like the sports betting world was for gambling, for gaming, because it seems to me what gaming was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I worked at Acclaim Entertainment on Mortal Kombat in 1997 or whatever year it was, and then we worked at Zynga in 2007, 8 or so on an IPO. And the difference of what gaming's evolved to do is not anyway what it was then in terms of the brand. So I definitely think it has a branding problem.
There's this, stereotype of a gamer as teenage boy in the basement, headset on, and that's still so pervasive in the industry today. And that's one of the things that we're kind of trying to counter against. And when you look at who the demographic and the audience breakdown of who gamers are, 50% are actually women. And that number actually often surprises people. But again, when you're thinking about mobile, which often kind of gets left out of this conversation, but one of the things that we try to do to kind of counteract that point is, rather than talking about this term gamer, because I think that really brings up that stereotype and that image and this concept of identity and do you call yourself a gamer or not, we try to think more in terms of players. And you have that language shift, again, to kind of just try and help with folks kind of joining the dots about who they're really able to reach in the gaming audience today.
Yeah, go ahead.
But but I think there is a difference between casual gaming and gaming that consumes a lot of cycles and energy and skill level. So, I mean, you can play Scrabble because you already know what Scrabble is, or you can play something else because you knew it. But then, somebody who plays Fortnite, as an example, and is really good at it, they spend enormous amount of energy and time. So I think that there is a clear differentiation between casual gaming and what I call as immersive gaming. And we have a branding problem, I think, for the casual gaming part for sure, because I think a lot of people don't think that is gaming. But the formal gaming part, I think, it's clear in my mind. And I think that people say, well, that's real gaming. Now, I would say parents give a bad rap for gaming because they hate that the kid is spending 8 hours playing some game. And they're like, where is your homework? Where is your homework? Do your homework. So I think a little bit of this is also society basically looking at gaming and saying, hey, you're wasting your time. Meanwhile, research would say gaming does have some very positive benefits. So I think that if we talk about branding, we should really talk about, hey, how do you actually change perception? So at least that's my point of view.
I love it. And so, as someone that has an e-commerce in their title, you're obviously probably very focused on measurement. I would just make that assumption. So when you think about gaming and you think about the community that you have, and we talked a little bit about it, how do you think about measurement, and how does measurement factor into your lens on gaming, casual or more professional?
Yeah, so look, the most simple one is for Lenovo, how many game devices do we sell? Very easy. We sell, I don't know, $5 billion worth of stuff every year. That's the easy part. The difficult part is to really understand sentiment. Like, what does a gamer think about us as a company? And that measurement is usually measured through engagement. So you say, like, how do you engage with us? Maybe community, maybe the brand. Do you come back often? How much time do you spend with us? How much money do you spend with us? If we track the people in the community, are community members going to be more likely to buy than somebody who's not a community member? So the entire idea is when we invest in gaming community or peripherals or stuff around it, the ecosystem, we are saying, hey, how do you monetize the gaming sentiment? Now, like I said 5 minutes ago, that was at least my initial take when I started the gaming community. Today, I have a very different perspective. And my perspective is that gaming and communities, investment in that is absolutely essential for brands to really build that connection with Gen Zs and Gen Alphas who have a real problem with social isolation, mental health, lots of other issues. So how do you put a monetary value on something that I think is societally so important for us to go do. So we struggle, and my view is that as brands, if you really want to be relevant to Gen Zs, you got to really think about this both on the soft and the hard numbers. Selling is great, but you got to build that connection. And gamers, one thing I do know, they see through everything you do. And if you're disingenuous and you're not sincere, they will drop you like a bag of flies. So be careful.
I think as well, like going back to this idea of why brands are maybe hesitant to get into gaming. I think the game industry has work to do in terms of speaking the same language as advertisers. And that especially comes down to measurement, because I do think this question around ROI, and how do you measure it comes up a lot. And so one of the things that we try to do is we look at metrics to make sure that we're speaking the same language in terms of, viewability and brand lift and I think that is a critical piece, and I do think some of that lift is really on, game publishers themselves to actually meet brands and advertisers where they are in terms of the language, and so we're all kind of on the same page.
So an open question to everyone. When you think whether with your brand or just generally out there, have you seen activations, collaborations, ways in which brands have used games in the last few years or last few months, last year, where you've been like, oh, that's an interesting idea. I think about, and I'll just reference it again, Sport Beach. There's 12 different implementations down the beach here, but the folks at Stagwell came up with a way to do something different, right? Drive a different type of engagement. So when you think about the broader gaming definition, are there some things that stand out, some best practices, some things that have caught your eyes you'd like to share with folks?
Look, I mean, it is very personal to brands in terms of how you want to leverage that relationship with the gamer. For us, it was really important to build a relationship to promote women in gaming, just like we would do STEM and other things where we definitely believe there is a societal problem with not enough representation. And quite frankly, a lot of women gamers get bullied online in all-night forums. So I think we as a brand have chosen to say, how do we protect, how do we provide a safe environment for people to game? That's one. The other one, by the way, social isolation is not just for the kids, it's also for seniors. So what we also found is that there are seniors who are actually interested in gaming and want to connect with the lower, like the Gen Alphas and their grandkids, and seems like gaming is one way where we can connect. So what we did was we have got by granny or something. I don't know, I forget the term. But anyway, the point is you play with grandmothers and grandkids are playing with each other. So my point is it just depends on your brand as to what and how you want to pivot. For us, it was important for us to make sure that the societal angle of gaming was relevant. So I feel like we've made some progress. Definitely there's more room to grow and do better things.
Claire?
I mean, I always say you've got to have a player-first mindset. So you want to keep the player at the heart of everything, any kind of experience that you're thinking of. But one of the areas where we've seen really great success, and I'm going to use an example with Candy Crush, which hopefully you're all familiar with, but we actually partnered with the Prada Candy fragrance. And so you can see the alignment there already. You've got Candy Crush, you've got the Prada Candy fragrance, and we created this bespoke mini game using some of the Candy Crush IP, combining it with little Prada Candy fragrance bottles. And you play this mini game within the game, and you unlocked a free sample of the Prada Candy fragrance. We had 40,000 samples to give away. We gave away 40,000 samples within 24 hours. And now that is partly because you've got the IP of a game that people already love and are engaged with in Candy Crush that really aligns perfectly with the Prada Candy, kind of sample and their audience. And it's in this really engaging and fun format. And you're rewarding players for that time. By completing the game, they get that reward. So that was something we saw that was really, really successful.
Awesome. So 2 minutes left. We'll go Julie, Claire, and then Ajit. I have a kind of a meta question where there is no right answer, potentially only wrong answers. No, I'm just joking. So Julie, you talked a little bit about the transformation of sports betting and how that evolved into gaming. If you were to look 2 to 3 years out, where do you think the gaming conversation is going?
I think what's fascinating for a sport like ours is all the data that it's unlocking. So if you look at how you can get information about players and speed and tracking how long they're running on the pitch in our sport, you could see how many miles somebody ran in a game. You could see how the speed is. You can track the velocity, our balls, and all that kind of thing. So I think what's going to happen is it's going to come together and data is going to become more a part of a game. You're going to find ways to engage in that data, whether it's through fantasy and getting more info to build a better team, or it's going to be something that involves sports betting. But it's no longer just watching a game on the television or streaming it. You're going to have your phone with you and doing some kind of dual stream. It's already happening. It'll just become more mainstream.
Claire?
I think it's finding ways to create bespoke experiences at scale. So we're able to create a lot of experiences at scale really well, and then you can do the bespoke experiences, but they take a lot of investment in terms of times and resources. I think the sweet spot is going to be when we can find a way to do those more integrated kind of experiences with the IP and the brands, but do them at scale and do them more easily.
Nujit, 2 to 3 years, where do you see it going?
I think as a device guy, I'll tell you that experiential gaming, I think, is the future. Metaverse kind of was a buzzword and probably died before its time. It's going to come back, and I think gaming is going to be one platform where I do feel like experiential gaming is going to take off. You know, you talk about esports. It can be done through Metaverse at scale if you have the technology and the right engagement. So I believe that's going to happen.
That's awesome. So I want to thank the panelists not only for talking to us about gaming, but basically stating that the metaverse is coming back. That's a headline that we just covered off.
Might be a different name, like Web 3.0.
It has a branding problem. But with that, I want to thank all of the panelists, and yeah, appreciate it. Thank you all.